Valentina Moraes was dead, and all the evidence pointed to suicide. All this, except for one detail that disturbed Detective Augusto Ferreira. A suspect, the last person to see the victim alive, couldn't tell the same story twice. While the suspect believed he was using his lies to control the investigation, he was actually building his own prison, brick by brick, lie by lie. Until an email forgotten in Valentina's deleted folder revealed the terrible truth he had tried to bury.
The morning fog of Chicago still hovered over Lake Michigan when the first scream echoed through the 42nd floor of Lincoln Park's most exclusive residential building. It was 7:43 a.m. on a cold Tuesday in March, and Cecilia Andrade had just discovered that her boss, Valentina Moraes, was dead. The tech executive's $2 million penthouse presented a scene that seemed straight out of a movie. Panoramic windows framed the awakening city. Modern artwork decorated the pristine walls, and in the center of the living room, Valentina lay on the Italian marble floor, an empty pill bottle beside her right hand. Cecilia, who had worked as Valentina's personal assistant for 4 years, knew something was wrong before she even saw the body. The penthouse door was unlocked, something Valentina would never do. The executive was obsessive about security, a result of years building a cybersecurity company that protected the data of billion-dollar corporations. Police! Don't touch anything! The authoritative voice of Detective Augusto Ferreira cut through the air as he entered the apartment, followed by his forensics team. At 47 years old, with graying hair and eyes that seemed to photograph every detail, Ferreira carried the weight of 2 decades solving homicides at CPD. Something about this scene deeply bothered him. While the crime scene technicians worked, Ferreira observed every inch of the environment. Valentina's body was positioned almost theatrical, as if someone had arranged the scene. There were no signs of struggle, but there was also no suicide. For a woman who obsessively documented every aspect of her business life, the absence of final explanation seemed... Detective Ferreira, a soft, controlled voice interrupted. At the penthouse door stood a tall man with impeccable appearance, wearing a suit that cost more than Ferreira's monthly salary. "I'm Damião Vasconcelos, Valentina's business partner. I came as soon as I heard." Ferreira studied the man before him. Damião was about 40 years old, with dark hair styled with precision, and an expression of controlled grief that seemed almost rehearsed. But what caught the detective's attention most was the absence of genuine surprise in his eyes. "How did you learn about what happened, Mr. Vasconcelos?" asked Ferreira, his neutral tone masking growing suspicion. "Cecilia called me, of course. She was desperate, poor thing." Damião gestured toward the assistant, who was still crying in the corner of the room. Valentina had been going through a very difficult period lately. Business pressure, personal problem. "I feared something like this might happen." Ferreira made a mental note. It was interesting how Damião was already establishing a narrative before even being questioned. "When was the last time you spoke with Ms. Moraes?" "Yesterday afternoon, around 3 p.m. She called me, saying she needed time to think about some important contracts. Said she didn't want to be bothered for the rest of the day." Damião paused, running his hand through his hair. "I should have insisted she not stay alone." Something didn't add up. Ferreira had just spoken with Cecilia, and she had mentioned that Valentina was in meetings until 6 p.m. the previous day. Someone was lying. "Mr. Vasconcelos, could you accompany me to the station for a more detailed conversation?" Ferreira kept his tone cordial, but his eyes didn't leave Damião's face. "Standard procedure, you understand." "Of course, detective. I'll do anything to help discover what happened to Valentina," Damião responded without hesitation. But Ferreira noticed how he avoided eye contact while speaking. As they left the penthouse, Ferreira observed Damião greeting other residents in the hallway, with excessive familiarity for someone who supposedly didn't visit the building frequently. Small detail. That, individually, meant nothing. But together, they began to form a troubling pattern. In the elevator, Damião broke the silence. "Detective, I hope you'll investigate Benicio Tavares, Valentina's ex-husband. He never accepted the divorce well." Ferreira simply nodded, but mentally added another piece to the puzzle. Why was Damião so eager to direct the investigation? And why did a man who had just discovered his business partner was dead already have suspects in mind? The cold Chicago morning was about to become much colder for Damião Vasconcelos. He just didn't know it yet. The Chicago Police Department's 18th District Station buzzed with its usual morning chaos. But Detective Augusto Ferreira had learned to find focus in the storm. In interview room 3, he sat across from Damião Vasconcelos, studying the man who claimed to be Valentina's closest business associate. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Damião's face, but his composure remained unnaturally steady for someone who had just lost a friend. "Tell me about your relationship with Ms. Morais," Ferreira began, his pen poised over a fresh notepad. 20 years of interrogations had taught him that the truth lived in the detail, and liars always struggled with consistency. Damião leaned back in his chair, his movements calculated and smooth. "Valentina and I founded Secure Vault Technologies together 5 years ago. She handled the technical side. I managed business, development, and investor relations. We were very close." He paused, and for the first time, genuine emotion flickered across his features. "She was brilliant, detective. Absolutely brilliant." "When you say very close, what exactly do you mean?" Ferreira pressed, noting how Damião's hands remained perfectly still. No nervous gestures, no fidgeting. Most people showed some physical signs of stress during police interview. "We were partners in every sense except romantic," Damião replied without missing a beat. "Valentina was married to her work. After her divorce from Benicio 2 years ago, she threw herself even deeper into the company. Sometimes I worried she was pushing herself too hard." Ferreira made another note. "You mentioned Mr. Tavares earlier. Tell me about it." Damião's expression darkened convincingly. "Benicio never understood Valentina's ambition. He's a literature professor at Northwestern, brilliant in his own way, but he resented her success. The divorce was ugly. He made threats during the proceedings." "What kind of threats?" "He said she'd regret choosing money over family, that her ambition would destroy her." Damião shook his head sadly. "Valentina was devastated. She really tried to make that marriage work." As Damião spoke, Detective Lorena Silva entered the observation room next door, watching through the one-way mirror. At 34, Silva had a reputation for reading people that bordered on the supernatural. She immediately noticed something off about the man in the interview. Meanwhile, in the basement of the 18th district, digital forensics specialist Isadora Campo was beginning her examination of Valentina's devices. The penthouse had yielded a laptop, 2 smartphones, and a tablet, all password protected, but Campos had ways around such obstacle. "Interesting," she murmured to herself as she cracked the first phone. Valentina's communication patterns were obsessively organized. Every email was filed, every text categorized, but there were gaps, recent deletions that seemed deliberate. Back in the interview room, Ferreira was probing deeper. "Mr. Vasconcelos, you said you spoke with Ms. Morais yesterday at 3 p.m. What exactly did you discuss?" "The Meridian contract," Damião replied smoothly. "We were negotiating a $50 million cybersecurity deal with a Fortune 500 company. Valentina was having second thoughts about some of the terms. She wanted time to review everything." "And after that call, you didn't hear from her again?" "Not a word." Damião's voice carried what seemed like genuine regret. "I should have checked on her. If I had known how fragile her mental state was." Ferreira noticed the subtle shift. "What makes you think her mental state was fragile?" Damião hesitated for just a fraction of a second, so brief that most investigators would have missed it. She'd been different lately, withdrawn, paranoid about business. Competitors, worried about the company's future. The pressure was enormous. "Did she ever mention suicide?" "Never directly," Damião said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But she'd make comments about feeling trapped, about wishing she could escape. I thought she meant taking a vacation, or maybe selling the company." As the interview continued, Silva stepped into the hallway and called Dr. Claudio Mendes, the medical examiner. "Claudio, I need preliminary findings on the Morais case. Something feels wrong about this supposed suicide." Dr. Mendes, a meticulous man in his 50s who had performed over 3,000 autopsies, was already suspicious. "Lorena, I'm seeing some inconsistencies. The pill bottle was found in her right hand, but Valentina Morais was left-handed. I confirmed this with her dentist's records. Also, the lividity patterns suggest the body may have been moved after death." Meanwhile, Cecilia Andrade sat in another interview room, tears streaming down her face as she spoke with Detective Silva. The assistant painted a different picture entirely. "Valentina wasn't suicidal," Cecilia insisted. "She was excited about the future. Just last week, she told me she had plans that would change everything. She was working on something big, something that had her more energized than I'd seen her in months." "What kind of plans?" Silva asked gently. "I don't know exactly. She was being secretive about it, but she seemed hopeful, not like someone planning to end her life." Silva pressed further. "What about her relationship with Mr. Vasconcelos?" Cecilia's expression shifted uncomfortably. "Damião was always around, maybe too around, if you know what I mean. Valentina never said anything directly, but lately she seemed cautious around. She started having me stay late more, like she didn't want to be alone with him in the office. Back in the basement, Isadora Campos was making her first significant discovery. Hidden in Valentina's browser history were searches that painted a troubling picture. How to detect hidden surveillance software, signs your business partner is embezzling, and most disturbing, legal requirements for removing a business partner. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the station windows, the pieces of a puzzle were beginning to emerge, but Damião Vasconcelos remained calm, controlled, and completely unaware that his carefully constructed narrative was about to collide with the truth. The investigation was just beginning, and Detective Ferreira could feel it in his bones. They weren't dealing with a suicide. They were hunting a killer who believed he was smarter than everyone else in the room. The third day of the investigation brought Chicago's typical March unpredictability. Snow flurries mixed with rain, creating a grey slush that reflected the murky nature of Detective Ferreira sat in his cluttered office, surrounded by evidence boards, crime scene photos, and witness statements that seemed to point in conflicting directions. But what bothered him most was how neatly everything was falling into place around one particular suspect. Damião Vasconcelos had been busy. "Detective, you need to hear this," Detective Silva said, entering with a thick folder. "I just finished interviewing Professor Benicio Tavares. Damião's story about the ugly divorce has some interesting details he failed to mention." Ferreira looked up from the financial records spread across his desk, such as, according to Benicio, the divorce wasn't acrimonious at all. They separated amicably. He even helped Valentina move into the penthouse. He says they remained friends, had dinner together just 3 weeks ago. Silva sat down, her expression grim. But here's the kicker. Benicio received a text message from Valentina's phone the night she died, asking him to come to the penthouse at midnight. He went. No, he was grading papers until 2 a.m. His teaching assistant can verify. But detective, the message was sent at 11:47 p.m. According to the medical examiner's preliminary timeline, Valentina was already dead by then. Ferreira felt the familiar tingle of a case taking shape. Someone used her phone after she died. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away in his downtown office, Damião Vasconcelos was orchestrating his masterpiece. He sat across from Rebecca Martinez, a private investigator he'd hired the day after Valentina's death, supposedly to find the truth about his business partner's suicide. "Ms. Martinez, I need you to understand how dangerous Benicio Tavares can be," Damião said, his voice heavy with concern. Valentina confided in his threats. She was terrified. Rebecca, a former CPD detective with 15 years of experience, took careful note. "What kind of threats, Mr. Vasconcelos?" He blamed her for destroying their marriage. Said her ambition was like a cancer that infected everything she touched. Damião paused, allowing emotion to creep into his voice. "The last time I saw them together, at a company Christmas party, he grabbed her arm so hard it left bruises. Valentina made me promise not to report it." What Rebecca didn't know was that the Christmas party Damião described had never happened. Valentina and Benicio had been divorced for 2 years and had maintained minimal contact. But Damião's story was so detailed, so emotionally convincing, that Rebecca found herself believing every word. Back at the CPD, Isadora Campos was diving deeper into Valentina's digital life. The cybersecurity expert's devices were like archaeological sites, each layer revealing different periods of her life and work. But it was the deleted files that were proving most interesting. "I'm finding systematic deletions going back 3 months, she told Ferreira over the phone. Someone with administrative access was regularly purging specific types of communications, financial emails, legal documents, anything related to the company's contract. Could Valentina have been doing the deletions herself? Possible, but unlikely. The deletion patterns don't match her usual organizational habits. Plus, most of these deletions happened during business hours when Valentina was in meetings. I'm cross-referencing with the company's security logs to see who else had access." While Isadora worked, Damião was making his next move. He arranged to meet Cecilia Andrade at a coffee shop near Northwestern University, close enough to Benicio's workplace to be symbolic, public enough to seem innocent. "Cecilia, I'm worried about you," Damião said, his hand gently touching hers across the small table. "The police are going to ask you difficult questions about Valentina's state of mind. I want you to be prepared." Cecilia, still raw from grief, looked up at him with trusting eyes. "What do you mean?" Valentina was struggling more than she let on. The pressure from Benicio, the business stress. She started drinking heavily in the evening, you must have noticed. Damian's voice was gentle, therapeutic. I found empty bottles in her office trash. She was taking prescription medications that weren't prescribed to her. Cecilia frowned. I never saw Valentina drink during workout, and she was very health conscious. That's exactly why she hid it so well, Damian interrupted smoothly. She was ashamed, but I'm sure if the police investigate thoroughly, they'll find evidence. Empty bottles at the penthouse, maybe pill bottles with someone else's name on them. As Damian spoke, he was planting seeds that would bloom into evidence. The empty wine bottles he'd placed in Valentina's recycling bin would be discovered. The prescription pills with forged labels were already hidden in her medicine cabinet, waiting to be found during the next search. But Damian's greatest manipulation was yet to come. That evening, he called Detective Ferreira directly. "Detective, I've been thinking about something troubling," Damian said, his voice carefully modulated to suggest reluctance. "I didn't want to speak ill of Valentina, but there's something you should know about her financial situation." "What about it, Mr. Vasconcelos?" "She'd been moving money out of the company accounts. Large amounts. I thought she was making investments, but now I'm wondering if she was being blackmailed." Damian paused for effect. Benicio knew things about her past, about how she built the company. If he was threatening to expose her, Ferreira gripped the phone tighter. "What kind of things? I probably shouldn't say more over the phone. Could we meet tomorrow? I have documents that might be relevant." As Damian hung up, he allowed himself a small smile. Every conversation, every planted suggestion, every false piece of evidence was pushing the investigation exactly where he wanted it to go. The police were so focused on building a case against Benicio Tavares that they weren't looking closely at the one person who had the means, motive, and opportunity to kill Valentina Moraes. But in his confidence, Damian was making the classic mistake of all compulsive liars. He was adding unnecessary details to every story, creating an increasingly complex web that would eventually trap him. Detective Silva was beginning to notice the pattern, the way Damian's accounts subtly shifted with each telling, how he always seemed to have just one more crucial detail to share. The hunter was about to become the hunted, but Damian Vasconcelos still believed he was in complete control of the narrative. Detective Lorena Silva had always trusted her instinct, and right now they were screaming. She sat in the CPD break room at 2 a.m., surrounded by empty cups and transcripts of every interview with Damian Vasconcelos. Something was wrong with his story, not obviously wrong, but wrong in the way a photograph looks when it's been subtly altered. "You're still here." Detective Ferreira appeared in the doorway, looking as exhausted as she felt. "Augusto, look at this," Silva said, spreading 3 interview transcripts across the table. Monday, Damian says he last spoke to Valentina at 3 p.m. Tuesday, he says it was 3:15 p.m. Today, he told you it was around 2:45 p.m. Ferreira frowned. "People misremember time. It's not just the times. Look at this." Silva highlighted several passages. Monday, Valentina seemed stressed about the Meridian contract. Tuesday, she was excited about the potential of the Meridian deal. Today, she was having serious doubts about working with Meridian. 3 different emotional states for the same conversation. Maybe he's remembering more details as time passes, or maybe he's lying and can't keep his story straight. Silva pulled out another document. "I've been tracking every single detail he's given us. 47 different facts about Valentina's mental state, her relationship with Benicio, her business concerns. 12 of them have changed in subtle ways across multiple tellings." Ferreira sat down heavily. "Compulsive liars. Exactly. They can't help themselves. Even when the truth would serve them better, they embellish, they adjust, they add dramatic flair." Silva's eyes were bright with the intensity of discovery. Damian isn't just a witness, Augusto. He's performing. Across town, Dr. Claudio Mendez was making his own troubling discoveries in the morgue. The preliminary autopsy had raised questions. The complete examination was providing answers that changed everything. Detective Ferreira, Dr. Mendez's voice on the phone was uncharacteristically urgent. "You need to come down here immediately. The Moraes case. We've got a problem." 20 minutes later, Ferreira and Silva stood in the sterile examination room, looking down at Valentina's body under the harsh fluorescent lights. "The toxicology came back," Dr. Mendez said, pulling up results on his computer. "Valentina Moraes died from an overdose of zolpidem, sleeping pills. But here's what's interesting. The concentration in her system suggests the pills were administered over a period of several hours, not all at once." "Meaning?" Silva asked. Someone was drugging her gradually, probably without her knowledge. The final dose was administered approximately 2 hours before death, but she'd been consuming smaller amounts throughout the day. Dr. Mendez pointed to additional results. Also, I found defensive wounds under her fingernail, microscopic, but they're there. This woman fought someone. Silva felt her pulse quicken. How long would it take for the final dose to be fatal? With her body weight and the prior buildup in her system, 15 to 20 minutes of unconsciousness, followed by respiratory failure. Dr. Mendez pulled up crime scene photos. But here's the most damning evidence. The pill bottle found at the scene contained traces of only her fingerprint. However, the pills inside had been handled by someone wearing latex gloves. I can detect the powder residue. Someone staged the scene, Ferreira concluded. Meanwhile, in the CPD's digital forensics lab, Isadora Campos was making her own breakthrough. Days of painstaking recovery work on Valentina's devices had finally yielded results. I've been reconstructing the deleted emails, she told the detectives when they arrived at her lab. Whoever was purging Valentina's communication made one crucial mistake. They deleted files from the local drives, but forgot about the automatic cloud backup. Isadora pulled up a recovered email thread on her monitor. Look at this exchange from 3 weeks ago. Valentina sent a message to her lawyer. I need to discuss removing a business partner. What are the legal requirements and protections available? Silva leaned closer to read. Does it mention Damião by name? Not directly, but look at this follow-up email from 2 weeks ago. Isadora clicked to another message. The forensic accounting has revealed discrepancies I cannot ignore. I need options for protecting the company and myself. Please prepare dissolution paperwork for Secure Vault Technologies. She was planning to dissolve the company, Ferreira. Gets better, Isadora said, opening another file. This email was sent to the company's bank 5 days before her death. Please freeze all accounts associated with Damião Vasconcelos effective immediately. I am implementing emergency financial controls due to suspected unauthorized access. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Valentina hadn't been suicidal. She'd been planning to expose and remove her business partner. There's more, Isadora continued. I found evidence that someone was accessing Valentina's computer remotely. The intrusion software was sophisticated, probably military grade. It allowed complete control over her system, including the ability to delete emails and monitor her communications in real time. Can you trace where the remote access originated? Silva asked. Isadora smiled grimly. Already did. The IP address traces back to Damião Vasconcelos' home office. As the pieces clicked into place, Ferreira felt the familiar satisfaction of a case coming together, but he also felt something else. Anger. Damião hadn't just killed Valentina. He'd spent days manipulating the investigation, directing suspicion toward an innocent man, and playing the grief-stricken partner while evidence was being destroyed. We need to bring him in, Silva said, but carefully. If he's been monitoring police communications somehow. He hasn't, Isadora interrupted. I checked, but you're right to be cautious. This guy is smart, organized, and he's been 3 steps ahead of us from the beginning. Ferreira looked at the evidence spread across the lab table, forensic reports, recovered emails, financial record. Not anymore. His biggest strength just became his weakness. How do you mean? Compulsive liars can't stop lying, even when they should, and every lie creates more evidence. Ferreira's expression was grim, but determined. Damião Vasconcelos thinks he's been conducting this investigation. Time to show him who's really in charge. As dawn broke over Chicago, the investigation was about to take its final, decisive turn. But Damião still had one more card to play, one that would either save him or destroy him completely. The Chicago morning was crisp and clear, as Detective Ferreira and his team prepared for what would be the most crucial interview of the investigation. Damião Vasconcelos sat in interview room 3, impeccably dressed as always, still believing he controlled the narrative that had kept him free for 6 days. He had no idea that his world was about to collapse. But first, Isadora Campos had made one final devastating discovery. Detectives, you need to see this immediately, she called from her lab, her voice trembling with excitement. I found it, the smoking gun. Ferreira and Silva rushed to the digital forensics lab, where Isadora had multiple monitors displaying recovered data. Remember how I said the deletion patterns were suspicious? Well, I kept digging deeper into the cloud backup systems. Valentina used multiple redundancy services, typical for someone in cybersecurity. What did you find, Silva? An email in her drafts folder that was never sent. It was created the day she died, saved at 11:23 p.m. Isadora's fingers flew across the keyboard. The timestamp shows it was written just minutes before her death. Look at this. The email appeared on screen, and both detectives felt their blood run cold. 2. LegalMartinezLaw.com. Subject: urgent. Evidence of embezzlement and fraud. Draft saved March 15th, 11:23 p.m. Mr. Martinez, I am writing this as insurance. If something happens to me, please know that Damião Vasconcelos has been systematically stealing from Secure Vault Technologies for over 2 years. I have discovered offshore accounts, falsified contracts, and evidence that he has been selling our proprietary security software to competitors. More disturbing, I believe Damião has been monitoring my communications and may have discovered that I was planning to expose him. Today he came to my apartment uninvited, claiming we needed to discuss urgent business matters. He brought wine and insisted we drink to celebrate a new contract that doesn't exist. I am feeling increasingly drowsy as I write this. The wine tasted strange. If you receive this email, please contact the police immediately. Damião has keys to my apartment and knows my security code. I fear I have made a terrible mistake in trusting him. The evidence is in my personal safe. Combination 031585. Our company founding date. Please ensure Cecilia is protected. She knows nothing. Valentina Moraes. The room was silent, except for the hum of computer equipment. Ferreira felt a mix of triumph and tragedy. They had their killer's confession, but it came from beyond the grave. She knew, Silva whispered. She knew he was going to kill her, and she tried to leave evidence. The timestamp, Ferreira noted. If she died around midnight, she was writing this as the final dose was taking effect. There's more, Isadora said grimly. The email was deleted from her drafts folder at 12:47 a.m., 47 minutes after her estimated time of death. Damião came back to clean up, but he didn't know about the automatic backup system. Armed with this evidence, the detectives returned to interview Room 3, where Damião waited with the patient confidence of a man who believed he'd committed the perfect crime. Mr. Vasconcelos, Ferreira began, setting down a thick folder. We have some new information about Valentina's death. Of course, detective. I'm here to help in any way I can. Damião's smile was warm and cooperative. We found something interesting in her computer file, Silva said, watching his face carefully. Financial records that suggest embezzlement from Secure Vault Technology. For the first time, a flicker of genuine surprise crossed Damião's features. That's impossible. Valentina handled all the financial oversight herself. Exactly, Ferreira said, which made it very easy for someone with administrative access to manipulate the accounts. He opened the folder and slid financial printouts across the table. These show systematic transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, accounts that trace back to Shell. Companies you created. Damião's composure cracked slightly. There must be some mistake. Those aren't my accounts. Really? Silva pulled out additional documents. Because we also found the contracts where you sold Secure Vault's proprietary software to competitors. Your signature is on every page. You don't understand, Damião said, his voice rising. Valentina was paranoid. She was accusing me of things I never did. Her mental state was deteriorating. Her mental state was... Fine, Ferreira interrupted. Dr. Mendez completed the full autopsy. Valentina Moraes was murdered, Mr. Vasconcelos. She was drugged with zolpidem over several hours, then given a fatal dose. The color drained from Damião's face. Murdered? But the pill bottle, the scene looked like suicide. Yes, we know, because you staged it. Silva leaned forward. We found latex powder residue on the pills. We found evidence of remote monitoring software on Valentina's computer. We know you were watching her communications. Damião's hands began to shake. This is ridiculous. I would never hurt Valentina. I loved her. You loved her money, Ferreira said coldly. And when she discovered your theft, you killed her to keep it quiet. Prove it, Damião said, some of his old confidence returning. You have circumstantial evidence. Financial irregularities don't prove murder. Silva smiled. You're right, they don't. She pulled out a printed email. But this does. As Damião read Valentina's final message, his face went through a series of expressions. Shock, denial, fear, and finally, trapped desperation. His carefully constructed world was collapsing, and they could see him calculating, searching for one last lie that might save him. She was delusional, he said finally. Paranoid. She was making things up. At 11:23 p.m., exactly 37 minutes before her death, Ferreira asked, when she was supposedly unconscious from the drugs you gave her. We have security footage from your apartment building showing you leaving at 10:45 p.m. and returning at 1:15 a.m., Silva lied smoothly. We have GPS data from your phone placing you at Valentina's building during the time of death. It was a bluff, but it worked. Damien's resolve crumbled. You don't understand the pressure I was under, he said, his voice breaking. The company was failing. Investors were pulling out. I only took what I needed to save us. So, you killed her? It was an accident. Damien's facade finally shattered completely. I went to talk to her, to explain. I brought the wine to calm her down, make her listen. I only put a little something in it to make her more agreeable, but she figured it out. She started writing that email, accusing me. Silva and Ferreira exchanged glances. The confession was coming. I panicked. I gave her more pills to stop her from sending the email. I just wanted her to sleep so I could think. But she wouldn't stop fighting. Damien's voice trailed off as he realized what he was admitting. And then you staged the suicide, Ferreira said. Damien nodded miserably. I thought if it looked like suicide, no one would investigate the finances. The company could continue, honor her memory, by framing her ex-husband and stealing her life's work. I never meant for Benicio to be blamed. I needed the focus off the business. As Damien Vasconcelos was led away in handcuffs, Detective Ferreira reflected on the case. A compulsive liar had almost committed the perfect murder, but his inability to stop embellishing, manipulating, and controlling had created the very evidence that destroyed him. Valentina Moraes had found justice, not through the living, but through her own final act of courage, leaving a message from beyond the grave that ensured her killer would never escape the consequences of his lies. 3 weeks after Damien, Vasconcelos was arrested for the murder of Valentina Moraes. Detective Augusto Ferreira sat in his office reviewing the case file one final time. The trial was set to begin in 2 months, and the evidence was overwhelming. Damien's confession, combined with the forensic evidence and Valentina's posthumous email, painted a clear picture of premeditated murder disguised as suicide. But something still nagged at Ferreira. In his 20 years with the CPD, he'd learned that compulsive liars rarely told the complete truth, even when confessing to murder. You look troubled, Detective Silva said, entering with 2 cups of coffee. The case is closed, Augusto. Damien confessed. I know, but I keep thinking about something he said during the confession. Ferreira pulled out the transcript. I only took what I needed to save us. Not save me or save the company. Save us. Silva sat down. You think there was someone else involved? Maybe. Or maybe there's something we haven't uncovered yet. Ferreira turned to his computer. Isadora finished her complete analysis of all the financial records yesterday. I asked her to look for any other irregularities. As if summoned by their conversation, Isadora Campos knocked on the doorframe. Detectives, I found something you need to see. It's about the Meridian contract that Damien kept mentioning. They followed her to the digital forensics lab, where she had multiple screens displaying financial data and corporate documents. I've been tracing all of Secure Vault's business dealings over the past 2 years, Isadora began. The Meridian contract was real, but it wasn't what Damien claimed. It wasn't a $50 million cybersecurity. What was it? Silva asked. A buyout of Meridian Technologies wanted to acquire Secure Vault for $200 million. The preliminary negotiations were completed 3 days before Valentina's death. Isadora put up email correspondence. But here's the interesting part. Valentina was planning to reject the offer. Ferreira leaned closer to read. Why would she reject $200 million? Because she discovered that Meridian was a front company. Isadora's fingers flew across the keyboard, bringing up corporate filing. I traced the ownership through 6 layers of shell company. Meridian Technologies is ultimately owned by a consortium of foreign investors who specialize acquiring tech companies for their intellectual property, then dissolving them. Someone was trying to steal Secure Vault's technology. Exactly. And look at this. Isadora displayed another document. 3 days before her death, Valentina sent an encrypted message to the FBI's cybercrime division, alerting them to potential industrial espionage. Silva felt a chill. You're saying this wasn't just about Damien's embezzlement. The embezzlement was real, but it was small scale. Compared to this, Damien was stealing hundreds of thousands. The Meridian deal would have netted the conspirators hundreds of millions in proprietary cybersecurity technology. Ferreira's mind raced. If Valentina was about to expose an international conspiracy, then maybe Damien wasn't the only one who wanted her dead, Silva finished. Isadora nodded grimly. I found evidence that someone else had been monitoring Valentina's communications. A second intrusion, more sophisticated than Damien's amateur surveillance. This was government-level spyware. Are you saying Damien was set up? Not set up exactly, but maybe used. Think about it. He had motive because of the embezzlement, means because of his access to her apartment, and opportunity because of their close relationship. He was the perfect Silva pulled out her phone. We need to contact the FBI immediately. Wait, Ferreira said, studying the timeline. If there was a larger conspiracy, why didn't they just frame Damião from the beginning? Why let him try to make it look like suicide? Isadora considered this. Maybe because they didn't expect Valentina to figure out their plans so quickly. They might have been planning a more elaborate setup, but when she contacted the FBI, they had to move fast. Or maybe, Silva said slowly, they wanted to see if Damião could pull off the perfect crime. If he succeeded, the case would be closed as suicide, and no one would investigate the Meridian connection. If he failed, he'd take the fall for murder, and the real conspiracy would still be hidden. Ferreira felt the familiar tingle of a case reopening. We need to look at everyone who knew about Valentina's FBI contact. As they worked through the evening, cross-referencing FBI records with corporate filings and communication log, a disturbing picture emerged. The Meridian conspiracy involved not just foreign investors, but potentially compromised individuals within the US technology sector and government. But the most shocking discovery came at 11 p.m. when Isadora found one final piece of evidence hidden in Valentina's encrypted personal files. "Detectives, you're not going to believe this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I found a video file, recorded on Valentina's phone the night she died. She set it to automatically upload to a secure server if she didn't check in within 24 hours. The video showed Valentina in her penthouse, clearly affected by the drugs, but fighting to stay conscious. But she wasn't alone. In the background, partially obscured by shadows, was a second figure, someone who wasn't Damião Vasconcelos. She was meeting with someone else that night, Silva said, studying the blurry image. Someone who was there before Damião arrived. The figure in the video was too indistinct to identify, but voice analysis might be possible. As Isadora worked to enhance the audio, Ferreira realized that the Valentina Moraes case was far from over. Damião Vasconcelos was guilty of murder, but he might not have been the only killer in that penthouse. And somewhere in Chicago, the real architects of Valentina's death were still walking free, believing they had engineered the perfect conspiracy. The case that had seemed so neatly closed was about to explode into something much larger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Valentina Moraes, even in death, had one more secret to reveal, one that would shake the foundations of corporate espionage and government corruption. As Ferreira looked out at the Chicago skyline, he knew their work was just beginning. The compulsive liar had been caught, but the master manipulators were still out there, waiting in the shadows, and they had no idea that a dead woman was about to expose them.